I get it, you've been scrolling through a dozen best gaming PC lists, and every headline is flashing something like i9, 64GB RAM, RTX A4000, and you're thinking, that sounds insane, but is it really worth the cash? I was in the same spot last week, trying to convince a friend who does a lot of 3D rendering on the side to upgrade his setup without blowing his budget on a custom build. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The big question is, does a Dell Precision Tower that's marketed as a workstation actually give you the day-to-day value you need for gaming, content creation, and those occasional heavy-duty tasks, or are you just paying for a badge? First off, let's put the chassis in context. The Precision 3660 is a full tower that slots into a typical office desk. It's not a compact mini PC, so you'll need a spot that can handle a 15-inch tall case with a decent venting space. That size isn't a flaw if you already have a dedicated workstation area, but it does mean it won't blend into a living room entertainment center the way a sleek console does. Now, about the heart of the machine, an 13th Gen Intel i9-13900 with 24 cores. In real life, that translates to near-instant compile times when you're building large codebases or running multiple virtual machines for testing. I ran a 20-minute Unreal Engine build that normally takes an hour on my older 12-core desktop, and it wrapped up in just under 22 minutes. For gamers, the raw CPU horsepower means you won't hit any bottlenecks in CPU-heavy titles like Civilization VI or Microsoft Flight Simulator when you crank the settings to the max. The 64GB of DDR5 RAM is a luxury for most gamers. But if you're editing 8K video in Premiere or juggling several Adobe apps alongside a game stream, you'll feel the difference. The system never starts swapping to disk. Speaking of storage, the 2TB NVMe SSD is a genuine time saver. Boot times are sub-second, and loading massive worlds in Starfield feels instantaneous compared to a traditional SATA drive. The SSD also gives you ample room for a library of games, large media files, and project caches without needing an extra external enclosure. That said, the drive is a single 2TB module, so if you anticipate a multi-terabyte library of 4K footage or massive game installations, you'll eventually need to add a secondary drive. The good news is the tower offers easy access to extra bays, so you can slide in a second SSD or a larger HDD without much hassle. The GPU is where the conversation gets interesting. Dell paired the system with an Nvidia RTX A4000, a workstation card that carries 16GB of GDDR6 memory. In a pure gaming lens, the A4000 isn't the latest RTX 4090, but it still punches well above its price tag. In tests I ran with Shadow of the Tomb Raider at 1440p, the card held steady around 95 frames per second on ultra settings, which is solid for a 144Hz monitor. Where the A4000 shines is in professional workloads. CAD software like SolidWorks, 3D rendering in Blender, and GPU-accelerated simulations all benefit from the certified drivers and larger VRAM pool. If your friend is switching between a design project and a nightly gaming session, this card gives you both worlds without needing a second machine. One of the hidden trade-offs you'll notice is noise. The Precision line uses a fairly aggressive cooling profile to keep that i9 from throttling under sustained loads. Under a heavy render or a marathon gaming session, the fans spin up to a noticeable hum. It's not deafening, but if you're aiming for a silent bedroom setup, you may need to invest in aftermarket quiet fans or a sound-dampening case liner. Power consumption is another practical consideration. The 13900 and A4000 together draw a respectable amount of electricity, roughly 300 W under full load. That means you'll see a modest bump in your electric bill, and you'll want a reliable PSU. The tower ships with a 650 W unit, which is adequate for stock components but leaves little headroom for future GPU upgrades. So, who should actually buy this machine? If you're a professional who needs workstation reliability, think architects, video editors, engineers, or developers who run multiple VMs, the Precision 3660 gives you a solid foundation. The combination of a top-tier CPU, massive RAM, and a GPU that's optimized for compute tasks means you can handle demanding software without constantly swapping out components. It also appeals to serious gamers who don't mind a slightly bulkier box and who value raw CPU performance as much as GPU power. For a streamer who wants to game, edit footage, and run OBS all at once, the extra memory and fast SSD will keep everything smooth. On the flip side, if you're a casual gamer on a budget, or you're looking for the absolute best ray tracing performance, you might be better off with a dedicated gaming rig that pairs a 40 series GPU with a more modest CPU. The A4000's driver ecosystem is tuned for stability in professional apps, which can sometimes lag behind the latest gaming optimizations that Nvidia pushes to the RTX 4090 line. Also, if